I used to believe in the player coach model. I used to believe like bring in a person who could do some selling, carry a quota, carry a bag as they call it, and also manage 2 or 3 people. And I thought that's what I was going to do here at Diamond. Turns out it's nearly impossible. You can't do it.
Welcome to the Mid-Game Mindset. Join us as we dive into the pivotal moments that shape today's top sales and marketing leaders, RevOps innovators, and entrepreneurs. This is where grit meets growth and the game changes for good. If you find value in this conversation, be sure to share it with another growth leader who would enjoy it. And now, let's get to the show. Welcome to the Mid-Game Mindset. I'm your host, Rich Bishop, and today's guest came to me through a previous guest, Steven Steers. Scott Sambucci has been a Silicon Valley sales and product leader for about 25 years. He's an advisor, a coach, a mentor. He's currently the global go-to-market lead for Naya One. And Scott, I'm really excited to dive in. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, man. It's an honor to be here. Always good to have somebody that's willing to listen to me.
Now, I hit on a couple of the highlights. I'd love to hear a little bit more about you.
So I'd say so probably 3 things come to mind. So number one, out of college, I was a history major, which doesn't leave you a lot of career options. And so I had a friend of mine who was a couple years older, and he said, you should do sales. You're good at sales. Even though I hadn't really done sales, but I waited tables in high school and college, paid my way through school, and I was, good waiter at Applebee's. So, Tuesday, all you can eat ribs. And so I ended up getting a sales job, ended up at a company called Prentice Hall College Textbook Publishing, which eventually became Pearson Education. So my job was to go to universities and sell college textbooks. And people ask me, well, what exactly does that mean? It means that whenever you were in college and you went to sell back your used book, and the bookstore said, I'm sorry, we're not buying those books back anymore, that was because of me. So I would either sell a replacement book, the professor didn't want to use the old one, or I sold the new edition. So that was my job. That got me eventually into a product role. And this is in the late 90s when the first sort of web 1.0 and distance learning, everything else was coming around. Got me really interested in technology. And so I ended up at a startup in Silicon Valley. So that first sales job, though, I think is probably the most important to me because it was an outside sales job. I was 22 years old, out of college. I had one of the best managers to this day for that point in my career. It just really was patient with me and taught me a lot of like how to think about selling. I read a ton of books. I was reading a book a week about sales and just really treated the whole territory as a business. And in my first year as a salesperson, I was the number 5 salesperson out of 300 salespeople in the entire company, and the number 1 in my discipline. So at the end of the year, when we had the big sales meeting and they're doing like the top performers, this guy comes up on stage and it's skinny guy wearing a tie, and people are like, "Who's the intern? Like, why is that guy up on stage?" And turns out I was one of the top sales reps. So that just taught me about how to like manage a territory. How to go to the payphone, use a calling card, call people back, check my email at night, just all the rudimentary stuff that unless you've had an outside sales territory, like a lot of people just never learn how to do that, how to manage your time, manage territory, manage, you're not sitting in your office every day. So let's say that was like critical point number 1. And then that also introduced me to technology. Critical point number 2, moving to Silicon Valley back in the early 2000s, working at an education startup, just getting into the Valley and the Valley mindset, and thinking I would move to California for 2 years and then move back to the East Coast. And that was, 22 years ago. So it just taught me, okay, Silicon Valley, this is how things operate. I grew up on the East Coast of New Jersey, had kind of the East Coast mindset. So learned California, learned how to think like a technologist, learned how, this part of the world works, which is completely outside the realm of most people's like thinking and possibility. So that was step number 2. And then step number 3, sort of related to family stuff, where I eventually got married, had our first only child. And I was working at a startup at the time. And I remember my son was about a year and a half old. So he was just old enough to start going to daycare. And I was traveling a ton. I was commuting 2.5 hours each way to an office from Davis, California to San Francisco. And those are the days I was home, technically, because I come home at night. And then the other weeks I have to travel. And I remember, getting a text message from my wife as I was going into a BW3s in the middle of Dallas, Texas to meet my team. And she said, Benjamin's really sick. I got to take him to the ER. And it still trips me up to this day, even though it was like 12 years ago, because I just remember the helpless feeling I had that I'm
Mhm.
stuck in Dallas. It's 6 o'clock at night. There's no flights home. My wife has to deal with this. My son's going to the ER for the first time. And I just felt really helpless. And it was that point where I realized I'm like, I can't do this startup thing anymore. Not right now. I need to be home more. And it took me a good 9 months to unwind that position where I could actually leave the startup I was at. And then I started my own company called Sales Qualia, where I did coaching and advising. And that's where I really became kind of my first real foray into entrepreneurship. Now, eventually I ended up winding that down and ending up in Iowa where I am now. But those were kind of like three key points. So one, getting the sales job, two, moving to Silicon Valley, and then three, reaching a point of maturation in my life where I needed to do something that was more for my family than it was for working at companies.
Yeah. And I know that realization had to be hard, but obviously you made a very good decision, great father, right, in
Well,
choosing that path.
you want to ask my son that? He might give you a different answer. No.
Maybe
Um,
now, but once he gets older,
That's
yeah.
right. He's right. Well, I mean, it was hard decision in some ways, but in other ways, it was really easy. Like it's an easy decision. I'm like, I want to be home. I don't want to do this anymore. I did love working at the startup and all that stuff, but you reach a point in your life where you've got two lives going on. You got business life and personal life. And then I just chose personal life. The hard part was just walking away from stock options and all of that piece, but you just sort of like, you don't know how that's going to work. But certainly glad I did it. I mean, for those, from the time he was, basically two till the time he was 10 or 11, ran my own business mostly from home. So I got to be there, take him to school most mornings, pick him up from school, get him breakfast, do all the things that I otherwise would never have been able to do. And I've been still working on a startup. So I'm
Yeah.
eternally grateful for that piece.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And before COVID made working from home a normal thing for a lot of other
Right.
people, right? Like you're,
Yeah.
you're kind of
Yeah.
blazing a path there, which is great.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it was just like about having flexibility. But by the time COVID came around, I'm like, can I go to an office? I want to get out of here. Like a lot of people.
Yeah, I've been doing this for a while. Time to get around more
Yeah,
people.
yeah. So
Yep.
there
I'd
you go.
love to talk a little bit about the transition that you made. So going to Silicon Valley from New Jersey is a big
Mm,
change, but
yeah,
then also history major, selling books to tech. How did you
yeah.
make that shift, and what were some of the lessons that you had to learn to kind of get your mind into the right place for that change?
Um, I mean, I was really lucky with where I worked at Pearson in that, like as a salesperson, at least for me, I found the training to be excellent, and the autonomy you were given was really good. My manager, like I said, was really good. We had really good product, so I was just lucky to be set up for success. And then, as you're selling the textbooks back then, we also started selling CD-ROMs that go with the books and companion websites. So I kind of backed into the technology piece just by way of having to learn the product and how to demo websites to professors that didn't know anything about technology. And then when I got promoted to a product role, then I had to build the websites and I had to build the tech that was going with the textbooks. So it's just kind of like this natural progression that it was just part of the career track that I was on. So I got lucky there. And then getting recruited to go work at a Silicon Valley startup. Now I'm like doing tech every day. So it wasn't like coming out of college, like I said, I was a history major. I chose history because there was no math. There's no science, no math, and no coding. I was like, didn't want to do any of that stuff until I started traveling to San Francisco and California when I was with Pearson to go to colleges and universities as a product manager. And then I had a couple of buddies from college that had moved out there a year or two before, and I would stay with them, and we'd go out and grab a beer, and they'd show me, show me San Francisco, and I'm like, this is the place I want to be. So it was really just kind of a merge of I happened to have enough tech experience that was valuable to a Silicon Valley startup from a sales business development standpoint, and I had the desire and the freedom and flexibility to move out there. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just kind of circumstances and being a little bit lucky.
Yeah. And the flexibility to roll with the punches,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, you're like
Yeah.
26, 27, single, living in New York, working in New Jersey. I'm like, sure, I could be in California in 2 weeks. I mean, that's the way the world works back then.
Exactly.
Now you ask me like, what's going to happen in 2 weeks? And I'll tell you in 2 weeks time exactly what I'm going to do. You got to plan 6 months ahead if I want to do anything like that.
Now, in those early days, you working with startups, you worked with a couple of startups in the
Yeah.
Valley. You helped them get from, in many ways, close to zero to millions in
Yeah.
ARR to get started.
Yeah.
What were some of the common themes that you saw between those startups that you were working with that helped kind of take them from that early stage to, actually getting to the point where,
Yeah.
okay, we're a real company now?
Yeah. It's going to sound so stupid and simple. The companies that I was with, we had founders and team that were willing to actually sell the product.
Mm.
Like if you think about back in the early .com days, it was like, oh, do website, do product launch. People are, customers will come. I was lucky in that the founder at Applio, which is the first company, he was a world-renowned economist, a guy named Paul Romer, who eventually won the Nobel Prize in economics about 5 years ago. So, I mean, this guy was like world-class economist, world-class academic. He wanted to start this company because of some things he had built for his classroom. And we're like, Paul, we need you to go on these sales calls with these other professors and do help us with product demos. He's like, okay. Paul, we need you to go to the conference and we're going to have a roundtable and have you talk about your teaching experience at Stanford. He's like, okay. Like he was not afraid to go talk to customers and be in front of customers. So, I say that because, even now in today's world, when everyone knows how important it is to go talk to customers and be selling, I still meet founders all the time. They're afraid to sell or think that the product should sell itself, or they're unwilling to learn how to sell in an enterprise organization that's highly complex. And then they're like, well, I just don't know why this thing isn't working. I'm like, it's not working because you're not doing the sales work.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it was that company in Applio, the second startup I did was Altos Research, same situation. Founder wasn't a world-renowned economist, but he was a really good product leader to build a company. And he told me the story. It was the first time he made his first sale. He was in a coffee shop because he didn't have an office, and he's calling people up and he's doing demos on his computer. And I remember this. He's like, the first person that actually wanted to buy it, they asked me how much was it, and I didn't know what the answer was because nobody had ever asked me that question before. So he's like, I just made it up. I'm like, $50 a month. And the guy was like, great, I'll take it. And he's like, awesome. And the guy's like, so do I give you my credit card or something now? And then he's like, oh yeah. What's your credit card? So he took the credit card number down on a piece of paper, and he had this credit card number and he didn't know what to do with it. So then he had to go to PayPal and set up a PayPal account to actually process the payment. And again, it sounds silly and you're like, oh my God, like that's, like I was like so infantile in terms of his business knowledge. But he literally was doing phone calls from a coffee shop and just figuring it out and being willing to do it. He got his first 100 customers on his own before he even brought me on. And of course, I help, build process and accelerate it and scale it. But any startup, if you look back, I mean, you can criticize people like Elon Musk or anyone else, but those people are out there selling, right? And unless as a founder of a company, even if you're, a CEO of a top company, I guarantee you, like, there's been a lot of fanfare on my LinkedIn feed about, I don't know, 3-4 months ago, how Oracle sold like $30 billion of cloud compute to OpenAI. And there's some people on LinkedIn that are foolishly saying like, hey, could you imagine the sales commission of that? I think it was actually 300.
Oh yeah.
You were like, oh, you imagine the sales commission of that guy? I'm like, are you that dumb to actually think that there's like a sales guy that started with like a cold email? Like, hello, Sam Altman. My name is Scott, and I represent a company called Oracle. Would you like to see a demo? It's like, no, freaking Larry Ellison is doing the sale. Like, that's how that deal gets done. So even at the highest level, the founders and the CEOs are the best salespeople. So any company, if you look at their success, in my opinion, it's always going to be traced back to a founder that is willing to take a sales mindset.
Next year's growth targets aren't going to build themselves, and guesswork isn't a strategy. Midgame Consulting's annual sales planning guide is built for CROs of high growth, high impact companies who want to use the latest frameworks and templates that build an integrated sales plan to start the new year off right. It's free and available for download. Just go to salesplansuccess.com. That's salesplansuccess.com. Yeah. And I know one of the harder transitions that the owners that have that kind of mindset have is eventually you get to a point, whether it's $1.5 million, 2 million, 5 million, there's some sort of breaking point in there where it's like, all right, we need the professional help from a sales point of view to come in. And maybe you can fly in on some of the enterprise deals, those larger deals like you were just referring to. But could you give some examples of maybe some of the challenges that you've seen, whether directly or indirectly from those that you've been around with, maybe the owners that have a hard time letting go of that sales, and how do they overcome that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's actually two mistakes that I see often with founders or owners. One, they don't hire soon enough. And two, they wait too long to hire. And it sounds like, well, wait, is it one or the other? So when I say is they hire they hire too soon or they wait too long. Meaning to hire too soon means I'm an owner, I don't have time for sales. I'm a product person. I'm an engineering person. I'm an operations person. I'm a financial person. I just gotta go find the sales person, the sales dude, the sales gal who's going to sell my thing for me. Now, the challenge with hiring too soon is that unless you hand a salesperson a sales process, they're not going to be able to sell. That's why they're a salesperson, not a founder, right? You have to build that bare bones, even if it's a very rudimentary framework on how you sell, and hand that to a salesperson and say, this is how we sell. These are our target customers. These are common objections. This is the best way to run your product demos. These are the key people in that organization you're going to have to find and talk to at some point in order to overcome their questions and help make sure they're comfortable. This is how we present pricing. This is how we do implementation. You got to give some framework to a salesperson, because if you go, here's the product, go sell it, the first thing they're going to say is, great. Who are our target customers? I'm like, I don't know. Figure it out. Okay. What's our value proposition? Well, we got this tech that does AI. You're like, yeah, but like, what problems does it solve? Like, I don't know. Figure it out. You know, you're like asking the salesperson to figure it out. Meanwhile, the salesperson is like, okay, I'm going to spend a year figuring out how to sell this thing and not sell anything at all because it's all experiment. And if I do happen to sell something, it's an accident. So they hire too soon thinking they can just offload sales, right? So that's one big mistake. The second big mistake is they wait too long, meaning they're unwilling to give up the reins of sales. They feel like, well, I'm the founder and I've got to be involved with every deal. And I'm the, the super duper product expert person. And it's not just parachuting in. Like, I need to be on the initial intro call, and I got to run the demo, and I got to answer the technical questions, and I got to negotiate the contract, and I got to be there for implementation. There's actually a point in your company's life where that's a detriment to your company and the perception, right? If you're selling to a large company, like right now we sold a bank. If I had, a CIO of a large bank, or the kind of people we talk to now, and in the very first sales call, it's our CEO doing baseline like qualification calls, the CIO would be like, this is like some super small startup with two dudes in a garage. Like the part of what they're evaluating is not just the product work. They're evaluating like, how robust of a company is this? How much structure is actually here? Because we fight this every day as an emerging company. We're going through third-party risk management. We're going through due diligence. People are asking us questions like, how many employees do you have? Where are they based? Do you have a SOC 2 audit, which is a security audit? Do you have an ISO certification? Have you done penetration testing? Who are your other customers? Can you make some referrals for me? They want to know that you're real. And if you're the founder and you're like, yeah, you're going to be our 20th customer and I'm still doing the cold calls, somebody at that stature on the other side of the bank, you're like, I probably don't want to deal with this company yet. This person should have figured out how to get me into their sales pipeline without him or her being involved. And that also leads to situations where now you try to bring somebody in and the founder is so stuck on, this is the way we must do sales, forgetting that they're the founder and they have a certain way they can talk to people and a certain nuance they can hear that nobody else in the world can hear. Eventually what happens is you actually can't hand it over because it's too founder led. So that's why I say sometimes I hire too soon and sometimes I wait too long.
Yeah. Finding the balance between the two.
It's
What
a
is that
balance.
sweet
Right.
spot based on the skill set that's there with the founder and
That's
others in
right.
the organization?
Yeah.
Now,
And I struggle that, like, sorry to interrupt. Like with Naya One, our founder, Karin, there are situations where I'm like, dude, I got this. Like, you don't need to be on that call. He's like, oh, yeah, I don't know. I should be on that call. Like, no, you shouldn't be on that call. Cause one, I can do it. Two, we need to save that for later on. Cause if you do need to parachute in, I need to do it at a time that might be a higher risk reward or
mhm.
higher point in the sale. Right. So it takes somebody who's willing to be told to back off sometimes. And because there's going to be a time and other times where I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this call. And he's like, you know what? That call, I think I should be there. And I'll think about it. I'm like, yeah, actually, okay, you're right. You should be on this one. So let's make sure you're there.
Yeah. It's become, it sounds like for you, especially at Naya One, it's become a partnership, right? You guys really have it sounds like a good push and a pull. And that part
Mm-hmm.
is the ones that don't have the push and pull and can end up in the right spot are the ones that get themselves in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, you got to have, I mean, yeah, I mean, I would run through walls for Karin, and I think he's seen that, and I have, and I will, because I trust him. He trusts my judgment. I mean, we just spent 4 days together in Canada, 2 days in Montreal, 2 days in Toronto, working together. Some meetings he did on his own, some meetings I did on my own. Sometimes we did them together. And just in between meetings, you're just spending a lot of time talking about philosophy of business and philosophy of sales and philosophy of, like, what's the strategy going to be? And in those conversations, I mean, we were just having a beer after one of the days, and he's just like, look, man, I mean, he told me this. He's like, I trust you with any decision that you'll make. I might not agree with it, but I trust you enough to know that you'll have a really good reason why you made that
Mhm.
decision. And I was like, that's pretty awesome,
Yeah.
right? To know that I have that autonomy and that freedom to make a mistake or to do something that may not work out. And that could be hiring somebody. I've already hired one person this week. Might be hiring another one next week. And he didn't have to interview him. He's
Mhm.
like, he's like, I want to, I'm really busy. I've watched some call recordings, so I've seen how they are and I'm pretty comfortable with it. I'll get on a call with them for sure. But look, if you think that she's the right person and you think that's what the salary needs to be to get her, go for it.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a good spot to be with that kind of trust
Yeah.
level that you've built. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't have, I wouldn't have unretired for anything less. You know, because when I started doing my sales consulting, I started joking with people. I'm like, oh, I'm retired, right? I'm not doing the startup thing anymore, right? That's why I stopped doing it, because I wanted to be home with my wife and, help support her in her career. She was finishing up a PhD.
Nice.
And so, yeah, so raising a child, she's like trying to finish her PhD. Um, and now my son got old enough to now she finished her PhD. And now she's like, okay, she's got her career. So I need to help support her as much as she was supporting me when I was running around doing the startup thing. And I was like, I'm done with the startup thing. But Karin actually was a client of mine in my coaching program. And so I got to work with him and observe him and his team for a year. And after I attended a conference with him, I was like, okay, I'm sold. And then I started winding down the consulting work, and then, full time with him. So I had time and patience to be able to do it. A lot of people don't have that, especially earlier in their careers, but I had the
Mhm.
ability to do that. And that's another reason why this works really well.
Yeah. I've got one more question on the startup sales aspect of it before we jump to a couple of other topics. But on that front, I know that one of the decisions that is always kind of really a difficult one to make early on for that founder that's doing the sales is, do I bring in a sales leader who's willing to also roll up their sleeves and get some things done for now, but can build out the processes and the structure that we need to hand off? Or do I bring in a couple of people at the BDR level to do some of the appointment setting and slowly kind of build up? So it's like the top down type of approach with somebody that can do both, or bottom up. How do you think about that when you're in those situations?
Yeah. So, I used to believe in the player coach model. I used to believe, like, bring in a person who could do some selling, carry a quota, carry a bag, as they call it, and also manage 2 or 3 people. And I thought that's what I was going to do here at Die One. Turns out it's nearly impossible. You can't do it. Meaning that when you're doing enterprise sales, especially at our level, we're selling to banks that our starting price point is going to be a couple $100,000, sometimes up to $1 million. Um, I mean, I've spent months meeting with dozens of people at one company just to get to the point where now we're ready to do the contract. And now it could be 4 weeks of just contract procurement, all of that crap. I mean, I'm going through right now, like sending text messages back and forth umpteen times in the last 3 days to try to get something signed by the end of the quarter because they need it for the budget and we need it for our numbers. If I'm doing all of that work and concentrating on 5, 6, 7 late stage deals and also going to conferences and also setting up meetings to go while I'm in Toronto and also getting ready for the conference that's going to be happening in 3 weeks time. And you're like, oh, by the way, we have these 3 salespeople. They all happen to work remote and we need you to manage those people. It can't be done. It just can't, not to any real effectiveness. And so when we brought me in, that's what I was doing at first. And what Karin and I realized is for me to be as effective as we need to be in the United States and Canada to ramp up the revenue here, my attention that was being spent with the salespeople based out of the London office was distracting me away from doing that. So we just basically said, Karin said, look, I'll manage the sales team here. You do US and Canada for now, get that up and running. And when we need to hire people, then we'll move into a managerial role. And that's I think one of the key decisions that we made early on was not assuming that we could just hire a player coach, because what you end up is getting neither, or like a mediocre version of both. So I say all that because I think the best thing a CEO can do is hire for specific roles and tasks first. Because if we go back to what we talked about earlier, you should be building that sort of first framework of a sales process. The only way to then test if it's an actual framework or is it repeatable is go say, okay, if I know this is how we get leads, if I do this stuff on LinkedIn and I send these emails and I go to these conferences, I can get leads as a founder. What you got to do is go put 2 or 3 people in that seat and go, hey, you 2, 3 people, these are the things I did. Can you also get similar results as I did? And the same on the back end on the customer service. Like, this is how I've been servicing customers and supporting them and doing implementations. Starting to build a little bit of a framework for that. Let me get somebody else to come do this. And can they do that with 80, 90% effectiveness as me doing it as a founder? That's actually the most important thing you can do first, is to get those things off your plate on the edges, the sales development, sales leads, customer support. It also proves that, yes, there's some scalable piece. And then you kind of start inching into the middle where now you hire an AE, 2 AEs, 3 AEs that are now helping you actually take over territory, take over accounts, converting deals into paying customers. And you're slowly kind of like pushing yourself out of the sales organization. That's why I think you got to squeeze yourself out from the outside in. Because if you do those things, then at that point, you're going to have, maybe you have 2 or 3 people on the biz dev side, including marketing, and you have like 2 or 3 people on CS. You have a couple account reps or account AEs or account managers. Now you've got like 7 to 10 people. Bring in a VP of sales that manage that team. And part of that management might be deciding which 2 or 3 people are no longer, willing and able to stay at the job. They're not performing as well as you need them to be, or the company's change and the roles change and that person's not adapting to it. Then they bring in some people they know and they start to make that team their own and they start to scale it from there. So that's, to me, the best way to do it. And that's what's ended up happening here, where I was hired as a player coach, turned out to be an individual contributor along with 5 or 6 other individual contributors. Now Karin is still heavily involved with some sales, but we're starting to squeeze him out. And now I'm going to take that VP role and start hiring people in the US to take over those roles.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you make a good point there too about people not necessarily being the right fit now that you're ready for that VP, right? Because that is a different atmosphere. It's a different culture. And it's very common that as the companies are growing, that you're going to have people that were there at the beginning that are really made for the early stages. And as the company evolves and gets to 30 million, 50 million, maybe they're not the right fit anymore. And you really have to take a good look at that.
And that includes the CEO, that includes the VP of sales, that includes individual salespeople, it includes engineers. Maybe you needed somebody who's like, wily, creative hacker type to get a first version of a product up and running. But when you start putting in structure and code check-ins and QA, they're like, I don't know how to do any of that. You're like, cool. Thanks for helping us get the first version of the product out. time for you to move on. We need somebody that's willing to do QA and willing to do code reviews and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's no different in sales. It's the same thing, right? You might find somebody that's like scrappy and creative and gets those early deals. Then you find out like those early deals were like kind of okay back then. Like, but their dollar sizes were smaller, or that customer wasn't our ideal customer, but we surely needed those things to get things going. Now we're telling that person, you got to sell this way to this bank with this value prop at this contract size. And they're like, I don't want to do all that. I want to do it my way. You're like, cool, we do it your way, but do it somewhere else. Now it's time to bring somebody else in who's willing and able and effective at running that playbook. It's just natural. That's why some CEOs, they get to a certain point, they're like, look, it's just better for me to step aside and bring in somebody else to keep running the company. It's just a natural course. You have to be able to have the talent adapt. Otherwise, you have to be able to make sure that the talent is adapting, or you've got to adapt the talent to fix that.
Yeah. There's the leadership author, John Maxwell, his like fundamental leadership Bible was called the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
Yeah, I've read it. Yeah.
And the very first chapter in there is what he calls the law of the lid, which is your ability to succeed is going to be capped by your leadership ability. So if your leadership ability is a 5 out of 10, well, then that's the most that you're going to be able to get in terms of success, in terms of value that you create, and so on. And I think what we're talking about here is very much about that you've got a certain lid to where your leadership abilities are or your sales abilities are that may work for a company of 1 to 3 million, but when you get to 10, it's a different type of environment. So the people that can make those moves are the ones that are moving their lid and actually getting stronger and taking on some of the being able to adapt, I guess, really, right? And being able to take on some of those
100%.
skills.
Or just figuring out, okay, this person was really good in this role for a while, but now we're going to take that person and move them over here. And that person's going to work on this problem that we now had that we didn't have before. And that was another part of our conversation that Car and I was having, just sort of like where do we move Scott around as we go? So at this phase, we need a VP of sales. The person's going to run and get to a certain dollar amount. Once we get there, then maybe then Scott hires a replacement, and then Scott does operations, or Scott opens up different markets, or Scott does this, or Scott does that. Because at some point, maybe I'm better, more effective for the company in a different role. And I think that's an open, honest conversation that whether it's leadership doing it amongst themselves or down to individual contributors saying like, hey, for the next 12 months, this is your job. If you do this really well, there might be a point where we're going to find somebody else to do that job. And then you can go tackle marketing for us, or you can go tackle advertising, or you can go help us do live events. Because it's also good for that person to develop new skill sets as they continually grow and develop. So you've got to, I think, I have that open conversation with people that have had work with me. I'm like, hey, this is your job for the next 18 months. And if you do this well, this is what's going to be next. Right. So then there's no surprises later on. And if they're not willing and able to adapt, then you go, hey, it doesn't seem like you're going to be a good fit. We're going to, move you on to the next opportunity.
Important to set the expectations up front. I think that's a really important step there. And it creates a lot of trust between you and the team. And it changes the conversation when maybe they aren't the right fit anymore, that it's a very different conversation when you've already set the expectations, right? You can that's really kind of plug in on that.
Yep. And they'll usually know it even before you say it. They're like, yeah, I was kind of feeling like this wasn't a fit. And I was thinking about maybe I want to pursue other opportunities. You're like, great. Let me know. I can help you.
Yep.
I can be a reference for you. Then you leave in a positive way because you never know when you're going to need that person.
That's right. And one of the things that helps in a major way is having a mentor along the way, especially early in your career. But frankly, we all need mentors throughout our careers at the different stages to help us with the skills that we have. I know that being a mentor is important. You mentioned in your early days when you first started selling the textbooks that you had somebody who really taught you the way of sales. Did that kind of plant the seed for you and that desire to then go on? And I mean, you've served as an adjunct professor multiple times at multiple universities. We heard from Steven Steers how important you were to his career and the mentoring that you've done there. What kind of set that for you? Are your go-to-market teams built for scale, or are they stuck in chaos? At Midgame Consulting, we turn high-growth challenges into operational wins. From sales strategy to CRM to process optimization, we help you get it right so that your organization can grow as your top line grows. Let's transform today's change into tomorrow's success. Visit midgameconsulting.com. That's midgameconsulting.com.
Karma. I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I never really thought about it. It's like, hey, why do I do these things? I mean, now I do it because, I'm 51 with gray hair, and, I look around and see people that are young, and it's sort of like, I'm looking for proof that the next generation is actually going to, like, there's promise here. And I've been fortunate, like, we've had people that have, taken care of my son that are now family friends. Like, we had this, at the time she was in high school, and she helped babysit my son all the way through the years during COVID. And then now she has a master's degree, and now she, in her 20s, and she has a career, and we invite her over to the house for dinner. So I'm like, wow, she's really smart and she does really cool things. And I'm like, there's promise there. So I guess I feel like, on the other hand, there's like a guy down the street that's in our community club, and he's still an undergrad, and he seems really sharp, and started asking questions about his studies and engineering major. And we started talking about GPUs, and I'm like, oh, I actually know somebody who has a company, would you want an introduction? And I think and what I told him, I was like, look, man, I've been 22. I know what it was like when I was a history major at Winthrop University, trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, I have no jobs, no prospects, no money. Like, what am I going to do? And I was fortunate to land an internship at John Deere, which got me some interviews, because it was, John Deere logo, which led to at least getting an interview with Pearson. And after that, I was, had hope. So I think part of it's just like, it's pay it back, because I would have wanted somebody to help me, and I've had people help me. That's probably the biggest part of it. The teaching and stuff just kind of came out of necessity. It was like, a lot of times it was just filling income opportunities. Like, the first time I started teaching was when I was living in Kazakhstan. I was over there for graduate school research, and then ended up staying for 6 months because the university found out I had a master's degree, an MBA in finance, and said, hey, can you teach finance for undergrads? I was like, I don't know. And they said, well, we have a teacher that's going on maternity leave. Can you fill in for a semester? I was like, sure. So I ended up saying I was supposed to be there for 6 weeks to do some grad school research, and ended up staying 6 months. So that got me into teaching. And then different points in my career, when I was making transitions, like when I left Blend to start sales quality at the consulting firm, I taught at Holt International Business School because it helped pay the bills while I was getting the company up and running, So part of it's just, I need to pay the bills, but I do enjoy teaching, whether it's workshops or webinars or, classroom. I actually, the thing I most enjoy is preparing the presentation, preparing for what's going to go, and then executing on that and delivering in a way that it feels like people are enjoying it and that they're learning. So it's, I'm helping other people, but also selfishly, I'm getting plenty out of it because I enjoy it. So, it's not all altruistic, I guess.
Yeah, there's a payback there for sure. Obviously, I mean, there are a lot of other things that you could have gone into besides teaching, right? To fill that up. There are other options out there, but yes, absolutely. I'm sure you're getting something from it, but I'm sure that there's a satisfaction in seeing the students grow, because you've also done that within your companies as well with some of the sales reps that you've worked with, and helping to see them grow. There's got to be some gratification that comes when they kind of hit those next levels.
Yeah. I mean, but even that, you could argue it's like, well, it's my gratification, right? So it's for me as much as it is for anyone. But like when I was at Holt, one of the students in my class ended up hiring to work for me at Sales Quality on part-time. And then when he graduated, he worked full-time. And then eventually he opened his own coaching business. And now he's got his own, he's a vegan bodybuilder in Mexico. And the guy's a stud. He's got a wonderful business. And I'm like, maybe somehow, some way I helped him out along the way. Or you mentioned Steven, same thing. But again, it's selfishly, I'm like, I help that guy out. So there's some of that. But yeah, it's good. I mean, I think people deserve a chance. if they're a hard worker and give them an opportunity to take advantage of it. Like I had an opportunity to go work at Pearson. They didn't have to give me that job. I earned that job in the interview. Um, Basically because I told them I wasn't leaving until I got the job offer. I had an
That's
interview
awesome.
and it was running long, and they're like, "Hey, we have somebody else down in the lobby that's also interviewing." I was like, "Great, why don't you go downstairs and tell them that you just filled the job?" And I said that in the job interview, and they're like, "Well, we can't quite do that." I'm like, "Why not? I mean, is there any particular reason why you wouldn't hire me?" And I just like closed them right there. I don't know why.
Damn, that is good.
Yeah, and I was like 22 at the time. I don't know where it came from. I just really wanted that job, and I felt like I was a good fit for it. And they're like, okay, we'll call you back. So then that was with the regional manager, and this guy, Butch Porter, who ended up being my district manager. He's like, he took me out. We talked for a while. I'm like, what's it going to take for me to get this job, man? He's like, I think you're in a good spot. Just give us a couple of days. So
That's awesome. I love that, man. That
yeah,
kind of confidence walking in, like, well, this is mine. This is mine.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love
So,
it. Are there any as you've grown, obviously you've changed in your philosophy, you've changed in your skills, you've grown along the way. Would you say, are there any philosophies or values that you held when you were younger in the New Jersey days that served you well that maybe don't serve you so well anymore, or you've dropped them and said, yeah, you know what, that was for that period of time in my life, and now
yeah,
I don't really feel that way anymore?
yeah. I mean, I think I've tried to drop as much of the Jersey guy as possible. Um, I went to undergraduate school down in South Carolina at Winthrop University, and um, I had been living in Florida. I grew up in New Jersey. We moved to Florida when I was in high school, and I went from Florida to South Carolina, but I was still Jersey, right? So I had a ponytail and shaved my head underneath, and I'm in the South, and I go to these cake parties, and I'm just sarcastic, you know, petulant New Jersey guy, and everybody's like, "What the hell is wrong with this guy? Like, why is he being such an ass?" And then the same thing when I moved to California, right? The first year or so, I got the New York attitude. I'm going to bring New York to San Francisco. And my buddies are like, dude, just chill, man. That's just not the way it works around here. So luckily I think I've shed a lot of the New Jersey, New York, East Coast attitude. I'm still pretty like intense in terms of my focus and stuff. And I can be pretty direct. Um, and people tell me I have a bitchy resting face sometimes. It makes me appear unpleasant and unapproachable. But that's just, sorry, I'm old. I have wrinkles now. Um, so I think the places I've adapted a lot is just being a lot more, attempting to be a lot more empathetic towards other people and their situation. I think um, as you encounter more people throughout your life and you start to get to know more people and you start to understand what their backgrounds are, first thing is like, for me personally, realizing how unbelievably lucky I was to be a white male born into, the United States with middle-class parents and having, good intelligence, good health, like pretty much every advantage possible that somebody could ever hope for. You just sort of take that for granted when you're younger. You just sort of assume that, but then you go to a place like, especially when you get out of the East Coast, you move to California where it's more heterogeneous and you have different cultures and different people and different backgrounds. Um, and then when you get older, like I did some volunteering for Special Olympics, and just I had a friend of mine. We were in a triathlon team together. He was coaching Special Olympics soccer, and he found out I played soccer. He's like, "Hey, you should come coach." So I was like, "Okay, I'll help you out." And then you get there and you realize, like, man, like these are wonderful human beings that are no different than the rest of us. It's just they were born into different situations as me. And then you watch their parents who have grown children or that are still living at home because they're not able to take care of themselves. And you're just like, whoa, wait a second here. Like life could have been really different for a lot of us, right? Um, so I think as you get older, you start to appreciate, where you see family members go through health problems and you're like, oh, wait a second. Like we're in our 40s now and, people die early. They can get cancer. They can, they have kids that could, pass away. There's so many things, you hire somebody to come clean your house and you start talking to them and you realize what they're going through in their life and worry about being deported because they have family and they went to Mexico and they almost didn't get back. you're like, damn, like
Yeah.
I'm looking around going like, when's the shoe going to drop for me, man? So I think if you don't at least try to find that awareness, and then I'm sure there's plenty of times where I forget this myself, but I think probably the biggest thing is just understanding. I've heard a couple different quotes to this, which is like, everybody has a pebble in their shoe.
Mm.
I forget where I heard that. It's on a Tim Ferriss podcast. And you just don't know who people are. You don't know what they've been through. There was the writer from the New York Times that ended up committing suicide. And he talks about the story where, like,
Mm.
father's in line with three kids, and the three kids are really whining and complaining and crying. And somebody's like, hey, can you control your kids? He's like, oh, sorry, my wife just passed away today. It's like, you
Yeah.
just don't know who people are and what they're going through every day. You walk through an airport and just look at people's faces. Like, you have no freaking clue what that person is going through. Like I used to do a lot of ultra running, and people would always get impressed. They're like, oh, that's really great. Like, man, you could run 100 miles. I could never run 100 miles. I'm like, so what? Like, it doesn't mean I'm any better than you. It means I'm probably dumb and stupid and you're not. Like, why would anybody sign up to do 100 miles and do all that training?
Right.
But the work, like the one thing that I hear sometimes with people is like, man, like the longest I've ever run is a half marathon. And I'm like, it's not a half anything. And like, what do you mean? I'm like, you ran 13.1 miles. Get in your car and drive 13.1 miles. That's a long way to run. Like, they shouldn't call it a half marathon because it's not half of anything, or people are like, oh, they do this stupid 5K and these people are out there doing a 5K. And I remember in my town a couple years ago, I happened to be at a park and this 5K loop finished in the finishing line of a park. And it was just like one of those, whatever, $75, run a 5K. And I remember watching these people getting to the finish line, and it's, they're finishing 5K in 30 minutes, 35 minutes, 40 minutes. And it's like, you don't know who those people are, because to them, it's not just a 5K. Because to them, maybe it's a person that had to go through chemotherapy for 6 years. Right. It breaks me up to think about this, because you just don't know what that person had to go through just to finish a 5K. Maybe it's a mom who had like 4 kids, and then she's got a 2, a 4, a 6, and 8-year-old at home. And she finally was able to make time to train. And she gets to finally do a 5K, like after raising 4 kids and putting her body through that. You can imagine how that feels to that person that maybe used to be a high school track athlete, but now after 4 kids, it's like, if anybody out there has a wife and kids, you realize like what having a child does to a woman and her body, the stress that it puts on it mentally, physically, emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, it's not just a 5K to that person. It's like a life achievement. People are like, oh, I just run 5Ks. I'm like, great. You're doing 5Ks. That's awesome. So, I mean, I try to think about those things when I'm out there, because you just don't know who people are.
That's right. Putting a lot of value in what people are going through is important. And Scott, we can see that throughout your career, the mentoring that you've done, the sales that you've done, and how you've approached it, and obviously the impact that you're having on the community that you're around, and of course your family as well. So I think that's a great place to leave this. I really appreciate you joining us here on the show. If people want to follow you or learn more about Naya One and the things that you're doing, how do they do that?
I say the easiest way, go to LinkedIn and search Scott Sambucci, or go to Google, Scott Sambucci LinkedIn. As far as I know, I'm the only Scott Sambucci on LinkedIn. It's the easiest way to get a hold of me. You can go to naya1.com if you want to, if you're, a bank looking for software, but that's probably not the best. I'd say just do that. If you're in the sales world, you can search for me on Amazon. I've written a couple books on sales. The most recent one's now a few years old, but it's called Stop Hustling, Start Scaling. So it's about that transition to go from hustling and getting those first customers and revenue as an owner of a company, as a founder, as a CEO. How do you get to a place where you're starting to scale that sales team and those sales efforts? And that's just based on my experience doing this for a few years. So you can, buy a copy of that if you want to. It's like $5, but I think it's well worth $5. So,
Absolutely.
but that's it.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And great. Yeah, we'll include all of the links in the show notes for everybody as well, so they can get directly there. But yes, please go check out the book, all of the books that are out there, because Scott, you are a wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much for spending the time with us and sharing. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us on the Mid-Game Mindset. If today's episode sparked a new idea or helped shift your perspective, share it with someone who's ready to grow. Subscribe, leave a review, and keep playing the game. With the right mindset, the best moves are still ahead. Until next time, keep changing the game.